Hi there, welcome back. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to subscribe. Now let's begin. A soft golden glow bathed the grand ballroom of the Oblonsky estate. Chandeliers shimmered overhead, casting a warm radiance over the sea of silk and satin. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the murmurs of high society. Anna Karenina entered the hall, her presence like a whisper of fate. She was beautiful beyond what words could capture. Her dark hair cascaded in elegant waves, framing a face that held both wisdom and longing. Her gown, a deep crimson, shimmered like a forbidden secret in the candlelight. The moment she stepped forward, the crowd parted, as if destiny itself had carved a path for her. Across the room stood Count Vronsky, tall, broad-shouldered, with a sharp, confident gaze. He was the very image of a man untouched by hesitation. And yet, as his eyes met Anna's, something in him shattered. It was not the first time they had met. Their first encounter had been at the train station, a moment carved in steam and snow, where the death of a man had foreshadowed the tragedy to come. But here, in the glow of the ballroom, fate sealed itself between them. Anna moved like a melody, each step echoing in Vronsky's soul. They danced, their hands barely touching yet bound by an unseen force. The world around them blurred. Conversation faded. The only sound was the rhythm of their hearts, beating in tandem with the waltz. But love, in its truest form, does not emerge without consequence. A shadow loomed over them, one that neither dared acknowledge. For in the depths of the hall stood Karenin, Anna's husband, watching. His expression was unreadable, but his presence was a silent warning. Anna should have turned away. She should have torn herself from Vronsky's pull. But when she met his gaze, she saw something she had never found in Karenin: devotion, desire, and the dangerous promise of a love that would consume her whole. And so the dance continued, a night of stolen glances, of whispered breaths, a night where Anna stepped toward the edge of her own destruction. The night of the ball lingered in Anna's mind like the warmth of a dying flame. She had returned to her home in St. Petersburg, to the cold halls of Karenin's residence, where duty reigned over passion. The walls were adorned with elegance, the corridors lined with silence. It was a house of order, yet to Anna it felt lifeless. Karenin sat in his study, his eyes scanning an official document, his face unmoved by emotion. He was a man of discipline, one who saw love not as a force of the heart, but as an obligation. When he finally spoke, his words were precise, measured. "You have been the subject of gossip," he said without looking up. Anna did not respond. She knew what he meant. The whispers had already begun. The stolen glances, the lingering touch of Vronsky's hand in the ballroom, the world had seen. "Alexei," she finally said, her voice soft yet firm, "do you think so little of me?" Karenin placed his pen down, regarding her with the same detached gaze he always wore. "I think only of what is appropriate," he replied, "and I caution you against reckless behavior." Anna felt a chill settle over her. Reckless, was that what love was? A recklessness of the soul? That night, as she lay beside her husband in their grand but lifeless bed, she closed her eyes and saw only one face, Vronsky's. Days passed, but the pull between them only grew stronger. Every encounter was charged with unspoken longing. A fleeting moment at the opera, A passing glance in the streets of St. Petersburg, a whispered exchange at the races where Vronsky rode with the desperation of a man trying to outrun fate. But it was not enough. Vronsky could no longer live in stolen moments. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, he found himself waiting outside her home, his heart pounding with the force of something unstoppable. Anna stepped out into the cold air, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She did not expect him. She should have sent him away. But when she saw him standing there, his eyes filled with something raw and uncontainable, she felt her resolve waver. "Why have you come?" she whispered. "For the truth," he answered. "Tell me, Anna, tell me you don't feel what I feel, and I will leave." She hesitated. She wanted to lie, to spare them both the agony of what was to come. But love is not a thing that can be denied. Instead, she stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "I have tried," she admitted. "I have tried to forget you, to silence this madness in my heart. But it is no use." Vronsky exhaled, his breath mixing with the cold night air. "Then don't fight it," he murmured, his voice barely above. A whisper. "Come with me." Anna trembled. The choice lay before her, her world of duty, or the fire of love, a fire that, once embraced, could never be extinguished. Anna could feel the walls closing in. The halls of Karenin's house, once merely cold, now felt like a prison. Every glance from the servants carried silent judgment. Every step echoed with the weight of her betrayal. And Karenin, he no longer spoke to her as a husband, nor even as a man wounded by love, but as an official preparing a verdict. She knew what was coming. One evening he summoned her to his study. She hesitated at the threshold, her heart hammering against her ribs. He stood by the fireplace, a letter in his hands. "I have consulted with legal advisers," Karenin said without preamble. His voice was precise, emotionless. "There is a path forward." Anna's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I will not seek a public scandal," he continued, placing the letter on his desk with deliberate care. "But I will not tolerate further disgrace. You will end this affair, and in return, I will allow you to remain in this house. You will continue to see Seryozha. And society, our society, will forgive your mistakes, so long as you conduct yourself with dignity." Anna felt as if she had been struck. "And if I refuse?" she whispered. Karenin's expression did not change. "Then I will file for divorce." The word hung between them like a blade. "You will be ruined," he continued, "and you will lose Seryozha." Anna's knees nearly buckled. Lose her son? The thought was unbearable. Seryozha was the one pure thing in her life, the one love. That had never wavered. Karenin saw her hesitation and pressed forward. "You must choose, Anna. Your son, or this indulgence." A sharp pain stabbed through her chest. Was that what he thought it was? An indulgence? Did he not understand? That this love burned through her veins like fire, that it was not a choice, but a force beyond her control? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Karenin sighed, as if he had already won. "Think carefully," he said. "Do not answer now. I will expect your decision soon." Anna fled before he could see her tears. That night she met Vronsky in secret. The moment she saw him, her resolve wavered. He was everything Karenin was not, passionate, alive, desperate for her in a way that made her feel like she was the center of the universe. She threw herself into his arms, her breath coming in broken gasps. "He knows," she whispered. Vronsky stiffened. "And?" "He gave me a choice," she said. "Leave you or lose my son." Vronsky's hands gripped her shoulders. "Then come with me," he said, his voice raw with urgency. "We will go to Italy, to Paris, anywhere. I will make a life for us." Anna closed her eyes, torn between the love that set her soul ablaze and the bond that tethered her to her son. "I can't leave him," she murmured. Vronsky exhaled sharply, his frustration evident. "You know Karenin will never let you have both." A long silence stretched between them. Then, with quiet determination, Anna whispered, "Then I will find another way." She did not know yet what that way would be, but she knew one thing: she could not give up Vronsky, even if it destroyed her. Anna had never known fear like this, not the fear of scandal, nor of Karenin's quiet wrath, but a deeper, more intimate terror, the fear of surrender. She stood in the dim glow of her bedroom, the heavy curtains drawn against the night. Outside, the streets of St. Petersburg lay cloaked in silence. Inside, her heart warred against itself. Karenin's presence in the house was like that of a shadow, silent, watchful, yet distant. He spoke little of love, less of passion, and only of duty. He did not ask why her hands trembled when she held a letter from Vronsky, nor did he question the restless glint in her eyes. But Anna knew he suspected. One evening, as they sat in their parlor, Karenin cleared his throat, his voice devoid of warmth. "I would prefer," he said, "that you do not make yourself the subject of idle conversation." Anna turned her gaze toward him. "And if I have already become one?" Karenin did not flinch. "Then I trust you will act accordingly." There was no plea in his voice, no desperation, only expectation. Anna felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. "Expectation," she murmured. "Yes, that is what you have always wanted from me. Not love, not passion. Only that I behave as you see fit." Karenin's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. That night Anna left the house. She met Vronsky at a private estate beyond the Neva River, where the world did not yet exist. He had arranged for the rendezvous with the precision of a soldier preparing for battle. The room was modest, dimly lit by candlelight, but to Anna it felt like freedom. The moment she saw him, she knew there was no turning back. Vronsky crossed the space between them in a single breath, his hands trembling as they cupped her face. "Tell me this is real," he murmured. Anna's lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she pulled him into a kiss, one that spoke of longing, of defiance, of a love that had no name, but burned all the same. For the first time in years, Anna felt alive. They spent the night wrapped in each other's arms, whispering secrets that no one else could hear. And yet, in the back of Anna's mind, she knew that love, true, unguarded love, could not exist without consequence. Somewhere in the distance, the city continued to move, unaware of what had begun. But soon it would know, and the world would never forgive her. Dawn crept over St. Petersburg like a thief, casting long shadows across the cold city streets. Anna sat by the window of the small estate, wrapped in nothing but a silk shawl. Vronsky still slept, his breath slow and steady, his face unguarded. In the golden morning light, she watched him, memorizing every detail, every line of his face. Here, In this stolen moment, they belonged only to each other, but the world outside would not allow it. She turned away, her mind clouded with thoughts of Karenin, of her son, of the whispers that would soon spread like wildfire. She had crossed the threshold now. There was no return to the life she had once known. A soft rustle of sheets. Anna. Vronsky's voice was thick with sleep. He reached for her, drawing her back into the warmth of the bed. "What are you thinking?" She hesitated before speaking. "That this cannot last." His arms tightened around her. "It can," he said, pressing a kiss to her bare shoulder. "We will leave, Anna. We will go away from all of this, from Karenin, from the judgment of society. We will be free." Anna closed her eyes, allowing herself the briefest illusion of that freedom. A world where they could love without fear, where duty did not exist. But was it real? She pulled away slightly, looking into his earnest eyes. "And my son?" Vronsky stiffened. "We will find a way, but you cannot stay in that house. It will destroy you." Anna swallowed hard. She knew he was right. The walls of Karenin's home had already begun to suffocate her. But the thought of leaving her child behind was unbearable. She buried her face against Vronsky's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Promise me," she whispered. "Promise me we will not regret this." His fingers brushed through her hair. "I swear it." But the world was not so kind. By the time Anna returned home, the weight of her actions had already begun to unravel her carefully constructed life. Karenin did not confront her immediately, but his silence was worse than any outburst could have been. She found him in his study, his back to her, his posture stiff. The tension in the room was suffocating. "You did not return last night?" he said at last, his voice devoid of warmth. Anna clenched her hands at her sides. "I was with a friend." A pause. Then Karenin turned to face her, his eyes dark with something unreadable. "Do not insult me with lies." Anna's breath caught in her throat. He knew. Karenin studied her for a long moment before speaking again. "You will cease this affair immediately." Anna's chest tightened. "And if I do not?" His gaze did not waver. "Then you will lose everything." She had known it would come to this, knew that her choices would come with a price, but hearing the words aloud sent a shiver through her. She turned away before he could see the tears in her eyes. Upstairs, in the dim light of the nursery, her son, Seryozha, slept soundly, unaware of the storm that was about to tear his mother away from him. Anna knelt beside his bed, pressing a trembling kiss to his forehead. How could love feel so right, yet bring such ruin? Days turned into weeks, and Anna's life became a fevered blur, a battle between her longing and her responsibilities. Karenin's presence in the house grew colder, his silence more suffocating. He no longer seemed like a husband, but an implacable figure, demanding obedience. Anna could feel herself unraveling beneath his gaze, beneath the weight of his expectations. She had made a decision, but it was not the one that would bring peace. One afternoon, she stood in front of a mirror, adjusting the folds of her dress. Her reflection stared back at her with eyes filled with conflict. In the silence of the room, the choice felt final, irreversible. She was going to leave, but how? The thought of abandoning Seryozha twisted her heart into knots. She had promised. Him nothing would ever come between them. And yet, her love for Vronsky, the fierce, burning love, pulled her toward an uncertain future. She met Vronsky the next evening in a secluded garden at the edge of the city. His figure stood like a dark shadow against the dimming light of the setting sun. "Anna," he said softly, his voice a mixture of longing and desperation. "Tell me you've made your choice." She trembled, not from fear, but from the realization that the choice had already been made in her heart. "I will go with you," she whispered. "I will leave." Vronsky's face softened, and for the first time in weeks, Anna saw a smile break through his intense gaze. He took a step forward, his hand reaching out for hers. But before they could touch, a figure appeared at the garden's entrance. Karenin. Anna froze. Karenin's expression was unreadable, his posture rigid as he walked toward her, the cold of his presence as palpable as the night air. "You've made your decision, then?" he asked, his voice a mix of accusation and resignation. Anna stood still, the weight of his gaze upon her, like chains. "I have," she replied, her voice trembling. "And you will leave everything behind?" Karenin pressed, his eyes searching. Hers for a trace of doubt. "I cannot stay," she said softly, though it felt like a confession. There was a long silence, filled only by the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Then Karenin spoke, his words cutting through the air. "I will make sure that you never see your son again." Anna's heart sank. "You cannot do that," but Karenin's face remained unmoved. "I can, and I will." Anna felt the ground shift beneath her, the pull of her love for Vronsky, now threatened by the impossible choice of losing Seryozha forever. She looked at Karenin, at Vronsky, and back at Karenin. In that moment, everything seemed to fracture within her. Her love for Vronsky was the fire that had consumed her. Her love for Seryozha was the anchor she had clung to. But now she realized she could not have both. Vronsky stepped forward, his voice fierce. "Then let us go. I will take you away. He cannot control you." Anna closed her eyes. She had longed for freedom, for a life without the suffocating grip of Karenin, but now that it was before her, it felt like a cage of its own. "I cannot leave him, Vronsky," she said, her voice breaking. "I cannot lose my son." A bitter silence settled between them. Vronsky's eyes darkened with frustration, his hands clenched into fists. But Anna could see the anguish in his face. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I cannot abandon him, no matter what." In that moment she understood. Love, true, all-consuming love, could not exist without sacrifice. She had chosen Vronsky, and in doing so, she had torn herself from the world she had once known. Now there was no place for her in either world. Anna withdrew from Vronsky's side and turned to face Karenin. "I will stay," she said, her voice steady, despite the storm raging inside her. "But I cannot forget you. I cannot forget what we've shared." Karenin's face softened, but only for a moment. "Then let it end here," he said. "Let us return to our old life." But Anna knew it could never be the same. Her heart was forever divided, the pieces of her shattered. World would never fit together again. The days that followed were an unbearable mix of silence and suffocating restraint. Karenin and Anna resumed their roles, she the dutiful wife, he the distant and controlling husband. But something had irrevocably shifted. The ties that had once bound them together in mutual indifference now seemed like iron chains, tight and unyielding. Anna found herself wandering through the halls of her own home, lost in her thoughts, her emotions a tangled mess. The memory of Vronsky lingered in every corner, in every fleeting moment of peace she could carve out from her fractured life. She would see his face in the crowd, hear his voice in the silence, feel the ghost of his touch on her skin. And each time her heart would ache with longing, a deep yearning that could not be quenched. But there was also the quiet presence of Seryozha, her son, the only piece of her life that still made sense. He had been the one constant in her world, the one pure love that had never faltered. His small hand in hers was the anchor she clung to as everything else slipped through her fingers. Yet even Seryozha could not fill the growing emptiness inside her. One evening, as the household settled into its usual routine, Anna sat by the window gazing out into the night. Her thoughts were consumed by the past, by the decisions that had led her to this point. The memory of Vronsky's touch, the burning desire she had felt in his arms, it was a fire that had never truly gone out. But now the fire was consuming her from within, leaving her hollow. A knock at the door broke her reverie. It was Karenin, his face cold, his eyes hard. He held a letter in his hand, his fingers clenched tightly around it. "What is it?" Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've received word," Karenin said, his tone tight with control. "The rumors about you, about us, they are spreading. The public is beginning to turn against you." Anna's heart clenched. She had known it would come, but hearing it aloud felt like the final blow. "I don't care what they say," she replied, her voice trembling. "You should," he said, his eyes flashing with a cold, calculating edge. "This is no longer a private matter. Your reputation, our reputation, depends on how you behave now. If you continue to indulge yourself—" He trailed off, the implication hanging heavily between them. Anna's pulse quickened. She had made her choice. "But at what cost? You would destroy me, wouldn't you?" she whispered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. Karenin's eyes narrowed, but he did not answer. The silence that followed was deafening. Anna felt the walls closing in once again, this time tighter than ever. The decision she had made in the heat of passion now felt like a trap. She had chosen Vronsky, chosen love over duty, passion over stability, but the consequences were far worse than she had ever imagined. She had thought she could escape, thought she could find freedom in love. But now she realized freedom had a price, and it was a price she could no longer afford. The next day, Anna received a letter from Vronsky, a simple note that trembled with urgency. It was short, but it carried the weight of everything they had shared. "I am waiting for you," it said. "Come to me, Anna. Leave everything behind. It will be only us." Anna held the letter in her hands, feeling her resolve begin to crumble. How could she stay when Vronsky was calling her? How could she endure this life of quiet despair when the promise of love burned so brightly just beyond her reach? And yet, when she closed her eyes, she saw Seryozha's face, his innocent smile, his soft laughter. The thought of leaving him, of never seeing him again, was enough to shatter her completely. Anna stood in the middle of her room, torn between two worlds. One was a life of duty, of painful restraint and quiet torment. The other was a dream, a life of passion and freedom, where love could reign without judgment, but there was no way to have both. The weight of her decision pressed down on her chest, each breath a struggle. She could feel herself sinking deeper, into the abyss of regret, the realization settling heavily on her heart. No matter what choice she made, she would lose something, perhaps everything. The days following Anna's receipt of Vronsky's letter passed in a haze of confusion and heartache. The weight of her responsibilities, the pull of her love for him, and the constant reminder of Seryozha kept her trapped in a prison of indecision. Every time she saw her son, his innocent face filled with love and trust, her resolve to leave faltered. How could she abandon him? Yet every glance at the cold, distant figure of Karenin, every word he spoke, reminded her of the life that was, slipping away from her, an existence hollowed out by duty, by the harshness of societal expectation. She no longer knew who she was in this house, in this marriage. She found herself at a breaking point. One evening, Anna stood before the mirror, studying her reflection as though searching for the person she used to be. The woman who had once believed in love, in passion, in freedom. The woman who had been whole, untouched by the world's cruel judgment, but now there was only a shadow of that woman. The fire within her had dimmed, overwhelmed by guilt, by regret, by the relentless weight of her choices. It was then that she knew she could not continue living this way. The thought of Vronsky still lingered, a faint pulse in the back of her mind. He was waiting for her, calling out to her, promising her a life where love was all that mattered. And yet, as she stood there, a bitter truth twisted her insides. Love alone could not save her. The thought of Seryozha filled her heart with unbearable pain. To leave him was a betrayal she could never forgive herself for, but the price of staying was just as high. She was suffocating in a world that no longer felt like hers. Anna's hand shook as she reached for the letter from Vronsky. Her eyes blurred with tears as she read his words again. "Come to me, Anna. Leave everything behind." But could she leave her son? Could she walk away from the one pure love that had given her life meaning? The door to her room creaked open, and Anna's heart skipped a beat. It was Karenin. His face was unreadable as he stepped into the room, his eyes heavy with a kind of cold resignation. "I have made arrangements," he said flatly. "You will not see Vronsky again. I will ensure it. If you choose to remain here, I will restore your place in society. I will allow you to see Seryozha." His words struck Anna like a slap. He was trying to control her once more, to bend her to his will with the promise of her son. But she knew that this life was no longer an option. She turned to face him, her eyes full of defiance. "You do not control me any more, Karenin." He blinked as if her words were foreign to him. "What do you mean?" "I will leave," Anna said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I will go to him. I will not be your prisoner any more." Karenin's face remained frozen, but his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, narrowed. "You are making a mistake," he said, his voice low, "a mistake that will destroy you." Anna could feel the finality of his words deep within her. She had made her choice. But now she understood. No matter what, she would lose. Anna gathered her belongings quickly, almost mechanically, her hands trembling as she packed. She did not know how she would leave, whether she would go alone or take Seryozha with her, but she knew she could not stay in this house. In the distance, she could hear the sound of horses, a reminder of the life she could not escape. Vronsky's letter still lay on the table, an invitation to a life that seemed more like a dream with each passing moment. As she looked around the room one last time, Anna realized how far she had fallen. From the woman who once held hope in her heart to the woman who now stood on the edge of despair with nothing but the promise of love to hold on to. She left the house quietly, as if leaving behind a part of herself that she could never reclaim. And as the door closed behind her, she knew she had made her final escape. The world outside Karenina's house seemed vast and indifferent. Anna stepped into the cool night air, feeling the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest like a heavy stone. She had left behind everything, her husband, her home, and the life she had once known. The only thing that remained was the hope, fragile and fleeting, that Vronsky would be waiting for her, ready to take her away from the suffocating confines of her past. As she walked through the streets, Anna's mind was consumed with 1,000 thoughts. Was this the right choice? Could she find peace in a life with Vronsky, or was she only exchanging one kind of torment for another? She felt like a ghost, a woman in search of something she couldn't name, something that seemed to be slipping further and further from her grasp with each step she took. The city around her was alive with movement, but it felt as though she were the only one not moving forward. She was caught in a moment, frozen between the world she had left and the one she was trying to enter. When she reached the station, she found herself standing in front of a train that would take her to Vronsky. The sound of the locomotive's whistle felt like a call to destiny, a summons to a future she had desperately longed for. But even as she climbed aboard, a gnawing doubt crept into her heart. She could still hear Karenin's voice, cold and distant, echoing in her mind. "This will destroy you." Her fingers tightened around the letter she had received from Vronsky. His words were like a promise, a lifeline, but she could not silence the voice that whispered that it might be too late. Was she too far gone to ever find peace again? The train lurched forward, its wheels grinding against the tracks, and for the first time in weeks, Anna allowed herself to feel something, hope. Hope that perhaps she could find redemption in Vronsky's arms. Hope that the love they shared could be enough to heal the wounds she had inflicted upon herself and the one she had abandoned. But as the train sped through the night, Anna's thoughts began to turn darker. What was she leaving behind? Was it too much to expect that a life built on such fragile foundations could withstand the weight of everything she had lost? She closed her eyes and let the movement of the train lull her into a restless sleep. When Anna arrived at Vronsky's estate, it was not the reunion she had imagined. He was there waiting for her, but the man who greeted her was not the passionate lover she remembered. There was a weariness in his eyes, a shadow of something that had faded between them. "Anna," he said, his voice warm but strained, "I've waited for you." But as Anna stepped toward him, she could sense the distance that now lay between them. The fire that had once burned so brightly seemed to flicker, dimming in the cool air that hung between them. "Are you happy?" she asked, her voice small, almost pleading. Vronsky hesitated, as if the answer to her question was more complicated than he had anticipated. "I am," he said slowly, his gaze never leaving hers, "but not in the way I thought I would be." "There is no peace, Anna, not for either of us." The words struck Anna like a blow. She had hoped for a new beginning, but now, standing before him, she realized the truth. They were both running from something, searching for something that could never be found. Anna felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her once, again. She had chosen Vronsky, but in doing so, she had destroyed everything she had once known. And now even the love that had once seemed like a refuge was beginning to slip through her fingers like sand in the wind. I thought. Anna's voice broke as she spoke. I thought we could build a life together. But I was wrong. Vronsky reached out, his hand touching her face, but there was no warmth in his touch. "It's not too late," he said softly. "We can still find a way. We'll go away, somewhere far from here. We'll forget everything." But Anna knew, deep in her heart, that it was already too late. There was no escaping the past, no escaping the choices they had made. The weight of everything she had sacrificed was too much to bear. She had lost her home, her husband, her place in society. And now she was losing Vronsky as well. The hours that followed were filled with silence, the two of them trapped in their own thoughts. Vronsky tried to comfort her, but Anna could feel the distance between them widening with each passing moment. She realized, with a sharp clarity, that love, no matter how intense, could not erase the scars of the past. The decision to leave had been made, but now she understood the price of that choice. There was no turning back, no escaping the consequences. As the night stretched on, Anna's thoughts grew darker. The weight of her mistakes, the lives she had shattered, was too much to bear. The man she had